feel offended.
I called you like 126.
What?
Nick,
Did you just call me 126 years old?
Well, yeah.
That's so rude, Nick.
I call my mom old all the time.
Yeah, but I'm probably still about 20 years off of her.
So probably.
My mom has gray hair at 30 because of me. She is 30.
All right.
My dad's almost gray hair.
Oh, goodness.
My mom is
literally fired.
Is it on fire?
Kyle still doesn't know what the word arsonist means.
Oh, God.
Look at yourself. Hey, you know who
Huh? Oh, I have no idea. I think somebody was messing with me. Yes, but I think somebody was pushing it.
He's dead.
Yeah, he died.
All right, y'all. So, topic of today, or what we're focusing on today, like I said, you guys have been really good with notes and stuff this week. Luckily, the notes today are more on the fun side, some things that are awesome about 1920s culture. Like I said earlier, when you guys think of the 1920s, you guys normally think of like the cultural aspects of it, like flappers and different fashion, and basically the whole movie of The Great Gatsby, right? So when we think about things like this is where we're going to kind of conclude, or as we're heading towards the end of our unit, it makes the most sense to talk about things like this, okay? We're going to go over a couple different topics when it comes to the culture of 1920s and what's going to permeate throughout what we call popular culture. So basically things that everyone participates in, just because it's you know, the sign of the times, whatever you want to call it, okay? All right, so the first thing we're going to talk about is, we're breaking all the rules. So the 1920s is a time generally, so when we're generally speaking, the 1920s, when we look at popular culture, traditional values were replaced with modern ideals. So we basically got some ideals, or we've got some things that were happening pre-World War I that just don't make sense in this post-World War I world anymore. So we're ditching a lot of traditional values and replacing them with lots of modern ideals, and basically moving forward into the modern era. Basing our conversation off of our women's suffrage conversation, women are breaking traditional gender roles throughout the entirety of the 1920s because we start off with that right to vote. And basically because of the economic prowess that's happening at or basically up until 1929 in the United States, we focused a lot more on having fun and doing things that were outwardly appreciated versus things that were, again, traditional in nature. So fun was the name of the game. Popular culture was all about having fun, spending money, participating in that culture. Spending money is always fun. It's better when you have a lot of it too.
Yeah, but does money make you happy?
Statistically, yes.
Emotionally.
Emotionally, maybe not. Statistically, absolutely. Yeah, Ryan. Kind of sounds like Woodstock. I mean, kind of. Woodstock had so many more drugs, though.
Yeah, well, but I mean, traditional values were all replaced.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Traditional values replaced. Women were out there doing whatever, breaking gender rules. Fun. Oh, yeah. Hippies just fall under all of that. Hippies.
Did you just say
I thought that's what they said.
All right. So the first facet of culture, or the first part of popular culture we're going to talk about is fashion. Fashion is a major way that the people of the United States, or the citizens of the United States, are going to show this outward appreciation for modern ideals versus traditional ideals, and as well a outward way to show their wealth, that they're willing to put money into this culture. So we're going to talk about women's fashion and men's fashion because they're vastly different. So women's fashion was basically overtaken, or was based upon this idea of the flapper. Okay? The flapper. Flapper. So how you knew, or how you could categorize a flapper, was a woman who wore short skirts, but generally just at the knee was short for that time period. So basically, if you weren't wearing a skirt or a dress that went all the way down to the floor, you're being scandalous. Their hair was also a really important part of fashion during this because bobbing their hair and cutting their hair real short was technically considered like manly. And basically, since like the whole conversation about them not gaining the right to vote was about like they'll turn manly, they basically were like, all right, I'll show you manly, and chopped all their hair off. Okay. Flappers generally, but everybody, you know, listened to jazz music, hung out in speakeasies, and flaunted their disdain for what was considered acceptable behavior or socially acceptable. A lot of these women who fall under this quote flapper category are going to be very young women, sometimes middle-aged. Flaunted their disdain basically means like, if you tell me to do something, I'm going to do the exact opposite because I hate you. I am intentionally doing the opposite of what you tell me because I don't want to do it. Right.
So wait, what if you tell them, hey, never make me a sandwich? They make you a sandwich.
Probably not.
Service.
All right, so when it comes to basically what it actually looked like or it coming all together, so we've got kind of these short knee length or short, you know, knee length skirts, very short hair, normally some kind of hat, like a bowler hat or something in their hair. This would be considered, or these two photos would be considered like middle class, low class flapper style versus this photo up here, basically from an advertisement highlighting high class flapper dress. This is for like Monday through Friday. This is for Saturday night. You know what I mean? At the speakeasy. Bussing it down. Yeah. Dizzy clubs. Yeah.
Go back to watching that scene break up.
Yeah.
Didn't they remake that movie?
Yeah. Fun fact, I also saw that in theaters. Leonardo DiCaprio's in it. The Spider-Man's in it.
Spider-Man?
Tobey Maguire.
Oh, no.
That's Spider-Man, yeah. Not y'all's Tom Holland. Tobey Maguire. Oh, I do love Tom Holland, but
Tom Holland's the best Spider-Man.
Tom Holland
Best
has a
suit.
big mouth.
Tom Holland is the best Peter Parker. Tobey Maguire is the best Spider-Man.
Okay,
No,
Tom Holland is the best suit.
Tom Holland is the best.
Andrew Garfield.
Yeah. My sister tried comparing Tom Holland to Mark Wahlberg.
How?
I will slap her for it.
Don't slap
Tom
people.
Holland sucks.
Okay, so
Oh, you're right. You're right.
So when it comes to women's fashion, most of the time this is going to be the trend, or this is what's going to happen, especially a lot of young women are going to participate in this flapper culture, okay? When it comes to men's fashion, it looks a little bit different, okay? When it comes to men's fashion in comparison to women's fashion was all about basically doing the opposite of what was traditional. Men's fashion was all about taking the traditional and adding some more cha-ching to it, basically, okay? Men were participating, so like if we've got the flapper look for females, what we have for men is the dapper look. The dapper look is all about, that's where he came from. I promise you. I taught this last year, and that's where he came up with it. I promise you. He told me. Dapper.
Oh,
I promise you. Asked him. He goes, he'll say, we talked about dapper fashion in U.S. history, and then I thought of it. I promise you. Pop-Tart is the best.
What song?
Lil Nilla. Lil Nilla.
I've never heard of it.
Levi Adolphs. Okay, so the dapper look, like I said, it's all about taking that traditional style and making it look basically more fancy. It's all about dressing very well. Always some kind of hat or rimmed hat or fedora, okay? If you want it to be very, very fancy, you'd bring out the gloves and the cane, like these gentlemen down here at the bottom. The normal everyday would look something like this, kind of towards the top, a pleated suit, striped in some way, a little bit of a hat. But if we're getting extra fancy, or if we're going out on the town for the night, we're adding the gloves, the nicer material, and the cane.
I feel that child is pain. I have to stay on a story.
So this is very heavy, or this advertisement is very heavy into the dapper look. So this would be like your 9 to 5 going to work type of thing if you're like a white collar businessman or something like that. The dapper look can also look something like this, where it's a little more casual, basically like golf attire. That's what I see when I see that picture.
I agree.
Yeah.
Gross.
So if you wanted to bring it down a little bit, basically, instead of a suit jacket or instead of a coat jacket, you'd replace it with like a pleated sweater or a vest or something like that. Always keep the tie, hair slicked down and slicked back, and then very nice shoes, obviously. I know it seems impossible to like have to dress like this basically every day, but like I said, this is all part of the popular culture. Everybody had agreed upon that this is what to strive for, so you strive for it. All right. Our next piece of information, or our next piece of culture that I want to talk about. So we've gone from fashion. Let's talk a little bit about art. Okay. Art is still a major piece of culture when we look at any time frame in any country. And when it comes to 1920s United States, art took every form of this phase called Art Deco. Okay. Art Deco was another way that the United States was throwing away traditional values and traditional ways of doing things. Basically, the United States, or the artists at the time, said, the big Renaissance paintings, those big intricate paintings and drawings and sculptures that we've been doing for a long time, that's a lot of work. How about we just simplify it, kind of take it down to the basics, use more geometric shapes, moving towards more simplistic artwork. And this is where we get Art Deco. So if you, like I said, this pattern right here is just like a basic pattern that exemplifies Art Deco, as well as something, like this. That black and gold contrast was also very popular when it came to Art Deco. And this style of geometric shapes, simplistic artwork, basically just making things beautiful out of shapes, permeates into every facet of 20s culture. So we see these types of art, and we see this type of stuff happening on clothing. We see it on furniture. These are some nice like shell chairs that are also exemplifying kind of those geometric shapes. We see it in architecture. Does anybody know what building this is? It's on the East Coast. It's in New York. There's like 8 different songs about it. It's New York. No. So close. It's like, there we go. Who said it? Empire State Building. Gosh, you guys are silly. All right. The Empire State Building. All right, so the Empire State Building, excuse me, guys.
Wait, what 9 songs?
Guys, huh? I was at least thinking about Empire State of Mind.
Yeah, like.
Okay, so this Empire State Building, or at least the top portion of the Empire State Building, is completed during the 1920s. And you can see that Art Deco style. This is like the very top of the spire. All the geometric shapes. You've got kind of the light hitting it to show that gold contrast. a lot of like old hotels, like hotels from the 1920s and 30s, will have this type of pattern like on their floors or on their walls in their infrastructure.
I wouldn't mind
It's not that bad. I think it's, I mean, it's just simplistic. It's geometric. It's not that bad.
having. I have the top
Yeah,
one.
Kyle.
Would you go up there for $1,000 and go to the top of it and look down?
No,
Yeah.
I wouldn't even go to like,
Free if you pay for all my traveling expenses.
Probably die
That's
from
like
it.
one of those
I wouldn't even go to like the fourth floor and look down. I don't like heights. I don't like heights.
I lived in the skyscraper one on
I don't like heights.
tall apartments in Spain.
I don't like heights.
And like I would just
Mm-mm.
regularly climb up skyscrapers or like
I have never lived in someplace hot.
No.
I went to the
You lived
highest
in
tower
Texas.
there was a helipad there,
Oh, really?
so it was all open.
I went to the top of, it's not Sears Tower anymore, but I went to the top of Sears Tower once because they have the look over. Like I did the thing like in Ferris Bueller, you put your head on the glass and you look down. But I haven't done that in a long time.
I'm
So
sure
you
you'll
don't
never
wanna
do
do
it
that.
again.
No.
The highest place I've ever been was the dome.
Yeah.
Oh, that was too, no, that was sketchy.
All right, so Art Deco and basically just this simplistic style of art is going to permeate into like normal art as well. So we still have painting. It's not like we get away with all of paintings, okay? So a couple of really famous paintings from the era, Edward Hopper. So obviously it's not necessarily the Art Deco style, but it's very simplistic. It's literally just a lady sitting in a coffee shop drinking coffee with a little bit of fruit behind her, right? So it's just that simplistic style. Pablo Picasso is very, very well known from having those sharp edges and those geometric shapes integrated into his. And then last but not least, we kind of have a very good example of Art Deco with this Joseph Stella painting, that it's like geometric and asymmetric. So it or symmetric, I should say, not asymmetric, symmetric so that it reflects on both sides. Yeah.
You chose very, no, for Pablo, you chose a very, weird. It's very dull compared to some of his other artwork.
Oh, I know, but this is the best one that I could find with like
Geometric shapes.
very, very good, clear geometric shapes,
Yeah.
basically.
'Cause I got to
That
go-
didn't have like some inappropriate themes to it,
Yeah,
basically.
when I was in Spain, I got to see some of the, like,
Yeah.
original pieces.
Why does this make him? Why does it make her look like she has a?
It's his art style.
Yeah,
I've never.
just
seen-
his art
I've
style.
never seen his art style.
All right, so let's move on to our next piece of culture, and that comes with literature. So literature is kind of like a form of art, right? We've got books and newspapers and different writings from the 1920s, or the authors that are very popular during the 1920s. We're going to talk about more literature during the Harlem Renaissance because there is a ton of poets and authors and literature that permeates through that side of culture, basically. But when it comes to popular culture, the people who are going to run the show, basically, are these group of men called the Lost Generation writers. Mostly men, I should say. There's a couple women sprinkled in there. But these authors called the Lost Generation writers. Yeah, Ryan.
During the Renaissance revival, like before this,
Yeah.
did their art contain a lot of the same themes from the first Renaissance? You know what I mean?
Yeah, yes and no.
Okay.
It was a lot of the same themes, but a different story, if that makes sense. That makes sense.
Well, there was the Renaissance revival was a period of time before this where it was their style was very similar.
All right, so the Lost Generation writers, like I said, are this group of authors that were basically very bitter. Okay, they were very petty, they were very bitter, and they rejected the values of the post-World War I era. So these were the people who were basically fighting against the modern era. So in the 1920s, we have rejected those traditional ideals and we have moved on to a more modern era. The Lost Generations writers say, no, we need to be thankful for those traditional values and we need to look back on them, okay? These type of writers and authors wrote books that expressed their new cultural ideals, which focused on a more party lifestyle and basically put down the party lifestyle, said it was bad, that having fun in this like newfound ideal system was not good, and that we should look back to what happened before World War I. Some of the main authors, or three of the main authors that we see in this category, are F. Scott Fitzgerald, who wrote The Great Gatsby. Ernest Hemingway wrote a bunch of poetry and full-length novels about World War I and about like what it was like to be a soldier, basically. And T.S. Eliot, also another famous poet, who wrote a little bit along those lines as well. Yeah.
Was Hemingway a soldier?
Yes, all three of them were.
Okay, I was just going to say, like,
Yep.
if he wrote about being a soldier, but
Yep.
wasn't actually a soldier, that would be expected.
All three of them were in one way, shape, or form. I'm pretty sure F. Scott Fitzgerald got like very wounded, like not mortally, because obviously he's still alive, or he was alive, but like very, very badly injured and had to come home, basically. So in this Lost Generation, themes basically are themes that permeate through this writing. Three main themes: decadence, gender roles, and the idolized past. So decadence is like indulging, right? So this party lifestyle, how everyone is basically going all out and indulging in this very wasteful and, you know, absurd lifestyle, and how whether it's good or bad. Gender roles, so kind of like bitter about women taking on a bigger role in society and in popular culture as the time goes on. And impotence is like not feeling manly enough, basically, among other things. So that kind of theme shines through on a couple of his books, or a couple of their books. And the idolized past, that everything before World War I, when everything kind of went to shit, basically, that everything before that was better, that we should romanticize the past and romanticize those traditional ideals to try and keep up with them. Okay? Yeah. Because it was so much better. They were the original, like, I wish I was born in this generation people.
But like, if everything happened from what happened before World War I, we would be having another World War because everything was exactly the same.
Yeah.
I mean, that's what I think.
Yeah.
I think that you can't want to have something that happened in the past and not take all the consequences that come with it as well.
Past always repeats itself. All right, so I have just a short video about the Lost Generation writers. This, it's only like 3 minutes or so. It's basically going to talk about the themes that we just talked about and the different authors that, and basically what they want to talk about or what their whole shtick is, basically. Okay. So, oh, it would help if I unmuted it. Come on. Boop. It's gonna be loud.
My name is Mr. B. The people who came of age during World War I experienced a dark and horrible time in which many of their hopes and dreams had been crushed because of the war. Because of this, they were known as the Lost Generation. Here's the story of the Lost Generation of writers. Once upon a time, there was a city named Paris, France. During the 1920s, lots of Americans moved there to escape institutionalized racism and the associated race riots, xenophobia, censorship, materialism, and prohibition. Perhaps most importantly, they escaped there because they could get a lot more stuff for their money due to a strong American dollar compared to a weaker French franc. Many of these American expatriates, or people living outside their home country, were writers and artists. They felt like they had more artistic freedom there than the United States. Perhaps the most famous of this group was a writer named Ernest Hemingway. He wrote a book called The Sun Also Rises. Published in 1926, the book is about a group of American expatriates who travel from Paris to watch the running bulls in Pamplona, Spain, among other things. At the beginning of the book, Hemingway quoted his friend and fellow writer Gertrude Stein, who called him and his friends, quote, the Lost Generation. Stein herself apparently heard the term from someone else, but regardless, from this point forward, the writers who came of age during World War I widely became known as the Lost Generation. All of these writers were American, while Hemingway, Stein, F. Scott Fitzgerald, and T.S. Eliot were among the most famous associated with this group. Other authors and artists that could get lumped in include James Joyce, Sherwood Anderson, John Dos Passos, John Steinbeck, William Faulkner, Aldous Huxley, Isadora Duncan, and Alan Seeger. Even composers like Aaron Copland get associated with the group. The Lost Generation writers often wrote about exaggerated experiences from their own lives. Generally, these experiences revolved around World War I and the years following it. They used common themes in their writing, such as pointing out the ridiculously frivolous and materialistic lifestyles of the very rich, the breakdown of traditional gender roles, or the death of the American dream. Perhaps no novel better demonstrates all of these themes than the classic novel The Great Gatsby, written by F. Scott Fitzgerald and published in 1925. Why were they called a lost generation? Perhaps it was the general lack of purpose or ambition caused by having all their hopes and dreams crushed by the war. Having seen pointless death and destruction on a wide scale, many of them had lost faith in the more traditional way of life. Because of this, some became careless with their actions, not setting goals or working towards something great. But they were great. Eventually, the term lost generation referred to all Americans who came of age experiencing the Great War. Basically, we're talking Americans born between 1883-ish and 1900-ish. It's through the art, though, we feel like we really get to know who this generation was and what they truly felt while going through such a stressful and anxious time.
All right. I think there are multiple generations of lost generations, but this one gets to be the first, basically. Yeah. All right. So the Lost Generation writers are a group of writers that we normally focus on. You'll see them again basically throughout your high school career. I know Miss Thompson has you guys read The Great Gatsby and you guys read poems from these people. Okay. So this is the first time you're going to see, or the last time I should say, you're going to see the Lost Generation writers. But it's good to acknowledge basically those themes and how other people are feeling about popular culture. Okay. All right. The next thing that we're going to talk about is like television and entertainment, or I shouldn't say television, entertainment and music. Okay. Or basically just things that people did to keep them entertained. And one of the things that's really going to thrive or really going to boom during the 1920s is the movie theater, or just movies in general, the moving pictures. Okay. We get to a point where we have movies with sound. And the first like moving picture with sound to hit the movie theaters and to hit the stage basically was one that all of you probably know and love. Let's see if it'll work correctly. Not Bambi. So this is the first cartoon with sound, as well as one of the first motion pictures in general with sound. All right, so it's just a bunch of antics. We don't need to watch the whole thing. But the nice little, the first time that we get to see our good pal Mickey Mouse, okay? Also the first cartoon with sound, okay? All right, so when it comes to movies and entertainment, like I said, we have the not so silent era coming out of the 1920s. So we finally get movies and different things that include sound with their pictures, okay? Other forms of entertainment or other things that people did to keep themselves entertained during the 1920s, because one of the main things, and we'll talk about this later on next week, With having so much money and with having so much, what's the word I'm looking for? Desire to spend it all and to participate in this consumer culture or participate in kind of this party culture, which means you also normally have a lot of free time on your hands. So we have like this rise in entertainment or in different things people can do to keep themselves entertained. Okay. Some of them are things like flagpole sitting. You go on top of a flagpole and see how long you can sit there. That's it. That's all flagpole sitting is. Okay. These gentlemen right here are participating in it. Basically, they put the chair on top of a flagpole to see who could stay up there the longest. Whatever floats your boat, I guess. Okay. Dominoes are also going to kind of hit the Western world very heavily during this because it's going to go along beautifully with our illegal bootlegging and speakeasy atmosphere. Okay. Crossword puzzles start showing up in newspapers, specifically the New York Times. That's the most famous one. Boxing as a sport becomes very, very popular, again, because it's very easy to gamble on, which goes along well with our decadence in our party culture, okay? And then bike racing basically takes the stage as well as something that people can go and watch and participate in. So it wasn't always just about like, what can I do to sit at home and do, or what can I do to pass my spare time, but what could I go and see that would also be entertaining. So movies, boxing, bike races, etc., etc. I just don't get how you can get into flagpole sitting. I just like the first guy is just like, you know what? I'm really bored. I'm gonna go climb this pole and sit on it.
Maybe he was trying to impress his girlfriend.
Maybe.
Why would you push your
Go ahead. Last one up there gets a house. All right. So along with some other forms of entertainment, or along with the party culture and the fun culture, the speakeasy culture, et cetera, also comes dancing, or another way that we can kind of keep entertained is through dancing or dance marathons. Dance marathons were extremely popular and basically gave way to like the modern high school dance. There was obviously like promenades and other things like that before this, but this dance marathon where people danced for hours basically gave way to like high schoolers and young people really wanting that as a party, you know what I mean? So people literally danced until they dropped. These would last for hours, even days. This particular photo or this particular photograph is from a dance marathon, the longest dance marathon recorded, and it lasted 3 days continuously, nonstop. So these people are literally like dead. It's a competition of sorts too, because you can obviously see like numbers on people's backs. So like who can continuously dance the longest. This photo is a little bit older, not necessarily. This is from like the 30s, but the same thing still applied. Okay. Dancing was a huge part of popular culture because there was, like I said, this party atmosphere that overtook the entire nation. And one of the things basically that it's a form of artistic expression, right? If I can't write, if I can't paint, if I can't sing, I can most likely dance, okay? So the most popular dance of the time period was the Charleston, a well-loved dance in American history. All right, so the Charleston, like I said, the most popular dance of the time. It is well loved by all in the United States. We're gonna see how well you can do it. Everybody stand up. Everybody stand up. I'm gonna teach you how to do the Charleston. Even if it's to stretch out a little bit, everybody stand up. All right, so I'm gonna show you guys, or you guys can watch this video over at least once. Everybody needs to stand up. Everybody out of their seats. Everybody needs to stand up. I'm not gonna ask again. Everybody needs to stand up. All right, you guys can watch it once through. They're gonna teach you how to do the Charleston, and then we can try it again, okay? Is it? Here, we got it. Come on.
Hey everybody, we're getting ready to do the Charleston dance today. And the
Come
best
on.
thing about this dance was that it was actually originated in Charleston, South Carolina by a gentleman named James P. Johnson. First time he did it, it was on Broadway. The fun thing I like about the Charleston is that it actually feels like you're squishing a bug. And you have to make sure that when you're leading into the dance, you want to think about the 5, 6, 7, 8 right before the dance starts so that we go right in time with the music and your movement. So we're going to be moving forward with your right foot, and then you're going to be stepping back.
You got
with
it.
your left.
Forward. Back.
As you get this rhythm moving back and forth with your feet, what you want to feel is that you want to start twisting your feet. That's the part where it's going to feel like you're squishing some bugs, okay? From here, you're going to add some
You got
arms
it.
with you. Giving a little bit of
Go,
stretch
Jace.
there. And
Good
then
job.
a little bit more
Doing the
weight.
Charleston.
Pause
Figure it out.
right here.
There we go. Nora's got it.
A little bit of freedom when you're doing this step. That is the Charleston.
All right. All right, let's try again. Let me go back to the beginning. You guys got it. You guys can do it. There we go. You guys can do it. Back and forth.
Your feet. That's the part where it's going to feel like you're squishing some bugs, okay? From here, you're going to add
Add the arms.
Giving a little bit of structure. And then when you have a little more freedom, you want to
Good job. Good job. All right, you guys can sit down. Good job. Give yourselves a round of applause. All right, good job. Everybody give yourself a round of applause. Yay, yay, yay. Good job.
Tell me that was not the treat.
No, that was not the treat.
You got points for doing that.
You get so many brownie points for participating. Thank you very much. All right, so last but not least is the last thing we're going to talk about today. Without dance, or there is no dance without having some music to go along with it. So the last piece of popular culture we're going to talk about is music, and the 20s is defined by this period called the Jazz Age. We're not necessarily rocking out to any heavy metal. We're not necessarily rocking out to any heavy metal right now. We're rocking out to some jazz.
But like kind of bluesy jazz.
It evolves over time during the decade. Yes, more ragtime jazz. It evolves over the decade, basically from its roots in the southern portion of the United States into more of a ragtime into popular culture. We're going to discuss that change during the Harlem Renaissance because it happens basically in African American culture. Okay, so the Jazz Age, or this term, the Jazz Age, is coined by F. Scott Fitzgerald in The Great Gatsby. And this style of jazz, or where it basically comes from, it originates in New Orleans as a fusion of African and European music styles. So we've got a lot of classical European instruments being represented in the Jazz Age, or during like jazz musicians. So things like the trumpet, the piano, basic like orchestral stuff, the bass, right? But then we're using tones and musical styles that are more concurrent with African music and African style. So putting those together in a fusion gives us jazz. That being said, the reason, or being that it's originated in New Orleans as well, it's a fusion of African culture. It's largely African American dominated. And jazz music becomes twice as popular because of the introduction of the radio. That no longer do I have to go to an actual jazz club or some shady back alley club, whatever, speakeasy, to see a jazz musician and appreciate jazz music. There are records now, people recording and putting out on the radio jazz music. It was a complete 180 and basically highlights that disdain or that movement away from traditional values and traditional things, just like the 1920s is all about, because jazz was so inherently different and so vastly different from like classical orchestra music and other classical forms of music that we had seen basically throughout the American history. It was not like, the quote unquote like country music, or, it's kind of bluegrass, whatever you want to call it. But, it's not like the old country music or the old tunes and hymns of religious background. It was nothing like it. It was very different. A couple of famous musicians when it came to the Jazz Age, or a couple of famous jazz musicians. Bessie Smith is pictured there on the right. She was a very famous singer and dancer. Duke Ellington is pictured there kind of on the bottom in the nice brimmed hat. He was also basically coined as the father of jazz music. He was very, very influential in getting a lot of other famous jazz musicians famous. And then good old Louis Armstrong kind of rounds out the pack as, one of the most famous out of the three, or out of basically any pack. Louis Armstrong is very well known for his trumpeteering, as well as his very low and raspy voice. I do, but I don't know if I want to show it. I don't remember which one I have linked. I don't remember if I have What a Wonderful World linked or if I have something else linked. I will. I'll show you guys. Once you've got this slide, you can go ahead and put your notes away. That's it for today. Okay. All right. Let's see what mystery link I have for Louis Armstrong. I don't remember which one it is. It's an ad. Don't worry.
Friday's not that easy.
Grammarly. Oh, I did use When the Saints Go Marching In. Oh, that sucks. This one sucks. I don't like this one. I did use When the Saints Go Marching In. It's not that bad.
Now, ladies and gentlemen, here's one you all can sing with us.
That's Louis Armstrong.
Saints go marching in.
Da, 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 da. Heck yeah. I don't like, hold on, I'm gonna show you the other one. Louis Armstrong. I'm gonna show you the other one. So that one kind of exemplifies his trumpeteering. God, it's loud. So obviously this is later in his life, but this is the more well-known one. So Louis Armstrong, one of the greatest when it comes to jazz music in that jazz age, and also very influential in the Harlem Renaissance as well, which is where we will pick up on Monday. It's talking about, you know, we just talked about popular culture. We're going to switch gears and start talking about the Harlem Renaissance and the difference between those two culture sets, okay? It's at the same time.
Oh.
They're basically happening simultaneously, but because of basically the racial divide, it seems like it's two different worlds, basically.
So is it a continuation of the Renaissance revival?
Yes, basically, yeah.